This isn't a technology thing on us versus China now. Now it's just purely economics. It's like, does their economy collapse or does our economy collapse? That's it.
The economic arc is definitely a big deal.
It's the underpinning of everything.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can't fight a war without an economy. You can't build badass new missiles without an economy.
Hi, everybody. This is John Koenig with Real Veteran News, here with good friend Andrew DiBenedetto, U.S. Army veteran with me, Ranger with me in the mortar platoon back in the day. Would you like to introduce yourself, Andrew?
Yeah, I'm Andrew DiBenedetto. Most people call me Dibbs. Been in the Army for, I think, 19 years now. Currently a reservist. I did grow up in the Ranger Regiment with John, and that's pretty much it.
That's right. Yes, Dibbs took me on my first Ranger mission. Do you remember that? I was actually thinking about that. Do you remember it?
I do.
It was like
actually.
that first one on that boring deployment. That one.
Yeah, it was very cold.
Yeah, we like. You remember the jackets?
Yeah, the freaking puffy hockey jackets.
Yeah. We rolled up in the helicopter and they had all these puffy jackets to like keep the guys warm. And I like run in and I look down. And I'm like, what the fuck are in these bags? I'm like, this is a perfect place to sit down. And I sat down on them motherfuckers. And then we're up in the air and the guys are like, give us the jackets. And we're like, we don't know what you're talking about. And then like halfway through, Dibbs like pulls a jacket out of one of the bags. He's like, look at these jackets. And I was like, oh, that's dope. And then we get off the bird. We're the only two people wearing the jackets and shit. That was my first mission. Not great. But other stuff happened too, but the jackets. All right. Well, do you want to take a moment to talk about your kind of ideological position leanings, stuff like that?
I'm a fairly moderate conservative, I would say. A little bit of libertarian leanings.
All right. Like guns.
Yeah, I'm into guns. I like guns a lot.
A lot of guns, yeah. So it's always nice. All right, cool. Well, let's start with the news then. I didn't want to talk about Hamas too much this week and the whole Gaza conflict, but it's kind of what's going on. There's some other stuff that happened too, but just to go over it, the news since the last show has been that I found interesting. There's this Hamas commander who is a battalion commander in charge of 400 Hamas dudes. And he is mad at Hamas, the leadership, and he's blaming them because he says that they had basically planned it like it was a military operation. They were going to attack the soldiers. They were going to like take some of them hostage. They didn't think it was going to be as successful as it was. Just like with 9/11, they didn't think the buildings were going to fall down. But he says that he's calling out the Hamas leadership because he says that at the last minute, they came in and they told all these young guys that we know are all like doped up on like, Syria meth and shit. Just do whatever you want. You know what I mean? Like just have a blast out there and good luck to you, inshallah. And that was it, you know what I mean? And so that changed the dynamic of it. And then Hamas is now kind of like, oh, we fucked up and went too far. And now the response is coming in and like wiping out a lot of their infrastructure. And they're on the defensive now. They basically like lost the initiative. What do you think about the Hamas commander?
I think that's totally plausible. Like, I mean, he could be full of shit. He could be lying, but it's also plausible. It's not like it's always been the most cohesive organization. And the dudes that he's taken orders from live outside of Gaza. So they're not going to be directly affected by retaliation necessarily. So it wouldn't surprise me too much at all if they did that.
All right, cool. Well, also another interesting part of it too is that they are talking about how the lessons from the Ukrainian battlefield, which is kind of the prototype or the archetype of this modern, semi-large, not small war, but also not great powers war, kind of like large to medium-sized proxy war across this 1,200-mile front in Ukraine, and that's kind of turned into a stalemate. But like the tactics of these drones, they were saying that in Ukraine, and we didn't see this coming, the Russians didn't see this coming, the Ukrainians started arming these little toy drones within days of the invasion, and that the tanks are thin on top and not meant to be attacked from above. And so it was very easy to take out a lot of these tanks with these very cheap drones. Apparently, Israel was slow to develop countermeasures, and the countermeasure is that they put this like a roof on the tank. Basically, you've seen the new tanks where they welded essentially this thing on the top to protect them from UAVs. But when the October 7th attack happened, they were not ready. And like there's that famous picture like right on the border where all the guys are jumping up and down on the Israeli tank, and they got them with a UAV drone, and they're pulling the Israelis out of the tank and shit. So it's like this failure to see what was going to happen, the threats, both from the threat and then also the tactics. Like, just getting wiped out on tactics. And honestly, our military didn't see it coming either. I mean, if that was us out there, we'd be just as fucked as the rest of them. You know what I mean? Like, our military has this air of superiority where it's just like, oh, we have all the, we're the best in the world and stuff like that. But like, honestly, if Ukraine was us and we were out there, like, our guys would be coming back with, their fucking heads blown off because UAV drone hit them in the back of the neck or whatever. I just don't see anyone like kind of grasping that personally. What do you think?
Well, a failure to adapt to this new tactic is definitely spot on, because it's not really a new tactic. It's not new at all. We've been seeing this since at least like 2013 or 2014 in Syria. We were starting to see things like this a little bit in other asymmetric conflicts. Russia would already have experience with this from Syria, but unfortunately most of their tanks were designed before a time of top attack munitions, just like the Israeli tanks were also designed prior to top attack munitions. So they're going to be more susceptible to that sort of thing. But putting the roof or the cage on it to try to deal with that as like mitigating band-aid is something that has been common practice for a long time, because like I said, that tactic's been around for a long time. The Ukrainians didn't just suddenly start doing that 2 days into the war. They learned that through the Russians, who learned it in Syria.
Yeah, I mean, I personally see it as military malpractice. I think these officers, even the NCOs, I mean, welding you got a motor pool, they got unlimited money basically. Just welding a cage on top of your $30 million tank or something, you're losing a $30 million national security asset and the people inside. Every single one of those families that got killed by one of these because they weren't prepared, that's military malpractice. They should have to go to the funeral. They should have to go talk to the mother and like look at the pictures of the boy and everything. Like, you shouldn't have to do that. You shouldn't get to sit in your office and be like, oh, yeah, we didn't put the cages on the tanks fast enough. Like, that's some Donald Rumsfeld shit. We also failed. We failed not knowing how the artillery game was going to play out. We had no idea how much artillery rounds, and that's really like the biggest thing. But also, apparently, we don't know how to fight trench warfare. We've got our trench warfare tactics from World War One, and the Ukrainians are just laughing at us. Like, why are you guys even teaching us at this point? We're like been training these people for this war and getting them ready, and I do think we really helped them, and they would have like fallen down in a second if we hadn't spent all that time like helping them ahead of time. But realistically, like, mistakes were made, in my opinion, big ones.
The big thing that they had the opportunity to learn from Western armies that doesn't necessarily come from direct experience, like their ability to adapt to trench warfare, that's experiential, right? That's not something that's necessarily easily taught. What they did learn from us is a less centralized command structure with more incentives for the NCOs. Like you were talking about putting roofs on tanks, like some NCO can be like, man, they're dropping stuff out of the sky on our tanks. We got this welding machine over here and some chain link fence. Let's just do it. Some armies that's just never going to fly. They're not taught, they're not trained in taking initiative in anything. So when Russia got all piled up outside of Kiev because everybody was lost and the officers weren't making decisions, that's a consequence of having that type of command structure.
Also, Iran is also, this is like a regional thing. So Iran shot down a Reaper drone, which is annoying, but it's a little bit of an escalation. Off the coast of Yemen, they used the Houthi rebels, MQ-9 Reaper drone. We've also had the base attacks across the Middle East. We have all these bases across the Middle East. They've all been getting attacked with these drones. Again, I don't know exactly what the preparations for this was or how soldiers and everybody were being protected, what the plan for this was, but I don't know if it's been fully mitigated. And I don't know if the Iranians dial it up on these base attacks on us, they're going to start killing some of our people. And then it's going to be like a bit of a different ballgame.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. I also don't think Iran really wants to do that. I'm not saying that like as a chest thumping thing. I don't think that they actually really have interest in entering into open warfare with a major nation. But they definitely don't seem to mind letting their proxies get their hands dirty.
Yeah, they're not in a great position. I mean, you're looking at the economy is not great. I mean, it's all really predicated on their oil exports to fund a lot of what they need. And so then their government, just like with Russia, goes up and down with the price of oil. I don't know. I mean, yeah, I don't think they really want to fight either. I mean, nobody was really expecting this Gaza attack to be so significant, anyone on any side of it, which is kind of weird. But
the fact that it was so sudden and not really that widely predicted or expected, at least not on that scale, kind of makes me wonder what other actors were involved in that. I mean, Russia's very heavily involved in the Middle East, and this is a great time for them to have an excuse and get arms diverted from their current top enemy.
Honestly, if Russia had anything to do with that, it's probably one of, if not the most successful asymmetric warfare operations ever. They literally pulled us out of Ukraine, essentially.
Yeah, and I'm not even saying it was like some super big brain stuff like where, they organized and planned it and all that. But, if you think that there's nobody in the Russian government that has contacts with somebody in Hamas and somebody in Hezbollah, I mean, that would be very naive, especially as involved as they are in the Middle East and the enemy of my enemy and all that. I do think it's entirely possible that maybe they just kind of said, hey, that big attack you guys have been wanting to do, maybe now's the right time.
Yeah,
Something
no,
like
definitely. Yeah, I mean, they worked through Iran, and Iran didn't really even know. They said that the attack was actually supposed to happen earlier, but it was delayed. So just a lot of stuff coming out. I mean, the history books will be written. There's a lot of intelligence out there. I mean, it is what it is. It's a battle and a war, and I don't know, massacre battle. I mean, there were some battles. I mean, some of the Israeli military were fighting them, and some regular Israelis fought too, but mostly it was massacre. It's just war. So we got to keep talking about it. Hopefully, I don't think it's going to end. So I guess we got to keep talking about it. It's just really emotional. Everyone just gets super emotional about it. You look at the TV.
Yeah, it's a very divisive topic, and everybody in the media has picked sides, of course. And I use Al Jazeera for a lot of my geopolitical world news, but that's not really a reliable source on this one.
Yeah, it's good to get different perspectives. I mean, I think MSNBC is the most interesting because it's like that network is just got split in it. You know what I mean? Because you have this kind of morning show, and then the New York is very heavily Jewish, but then there's also a lot of liberal, and there's also a lot of Muslims and people of color that like more side with the Palestinians. So you've got this like clash, and New York City is kind of like also right in the center of this. So in the morning you have like the Jewish Anti-Defamation League going on there, and then at night, and then some of these other shows, you have people that are essentially all entirely on Palestine. And I think they're just letting them go. I mean, what are they going to do? I mean, but that one's interesting. Go on Fox, and Fox is just, Fox. It's just going to predict very, very predictable content designed for old people, very old people. So I don't know. I just find that interesting. Have you been watching the news on that? Do you have like any news analysis on it?
No, I really haven't been watching it that much. But I've been kind of like sitting back and waiting see where the chips fall a little bit, because there's definitely an IO campaign surrounding this. And, some of my favorite news sources that I normally use for geopolitics, like I said, they're not as reliable in this conflict as others because they're very clearly biased, which is understandable. I mean, I would expect those biases.
Hopefully it ends or something, but probably a little bit more of a mess gonna develop.
I think it'll probably get worse before it gets better.
No, it's gonna get worse before it gets worse.
yeah, it might do that too.
All right. So they're starting a hypersonic missile investigation into this Army-Navy LRHW long-range hypersonic weapon program that keeps having these missile failures test after test after test where the missile like does not ignite, or it's not blowing up in air, and they keep spinning this bullshit. They're like, oh, we gather testing data or whatever, but that's bullshit because it's basically a simulation. If the missile doesn't go anywhere, like what fucking data are you getting? You know what I mean? Like how bad you fucked it up. I mean, it's still there. Like you're gonna go home at the end of the day, the missile is right where it started. So they're doing some kind of investigation. It's ludicrous. The guy, I thought it was hilarious here. He says, I think we'll figure it out. It's like, good luck, buddy. Like, it's your fucking missile. I don't know, man. It was supposed to be deployable for like early testing or something by the end of the year. So they're delaying that. It's called the Dark Eagle. They're doing a root cause analysis. It's supposed to travel 3,800 miles per hour, and it's got a range of 1,725 miles, which is this kind of intermediate range, which is super important. It's going to be super important in the Pacific because missiles are designed to go a certain range. These bigger ones, they can't go short range. So you give this sweet spot between these large intercontinental missiles that all the Navy ships and the aircraft carriers are going to be vulnerable to, and we need to shoot them. What do you think in general? We haven't talked about hypersonics. What do you think in general about American hypersonic missile development right now?
There's a lot of complexities in the design of them, but there's also the complexity is kind of overstated sometimes too, because it gets pitched as like this wonder weapon. Like, Russia talks about their hypersonic missiles like they're Germany inventing V1s and V2s in World War II. It's really not the case. Obviously, China is very interested in hypersonic technology because Asia is the theater where, we may see that this technology may become important. Missiles have been able to exceed Mach 5 for a very long time. What makes hypersonic missiles unique in this is they're able to fly very low, because even without mountains interfering, the curvature of the Earth delays early warning systems from being able to detect them until they're basically right on top of the target almost. And they could also maneuver right up to the target, which historically hasn't been true with like ICBMs and stuff like that. But to do all that, they have to be able to travel at Mach 5 plus for extended time periods, very low in the atmosphere, which generates a ton of heat, ton of opportunity for failure in any of the systems.
Apparently, there's a lot of opportunity for failure of the missile just staying right where it is.
Yeah, there's
just
that too.
It's like a teenager, and you're like, you got to get ready for school. And the missile's like, not today, Mom. I'm going to take today off. And why don't you come back in April 2024, and we'll see if I feel like firing myself off into the atmosphere then. I mean,
yeah,
it's fucking ridiculous.
We haven't really wrapped our head on how to make that happen properly. And there's probably more to it than is immediately visible on why that might be. But I don't really know the answer either.
I don't think they know the answer. And
They
honestly,
probably
the
don't.
Chinese spies there are like, what are these guys doing? Like, we don't even have anything to steal from them to send home to Beijing because they're so fucking stupid they can't get their fucking missile off the ground. Their whole report home is text message like it didn't happen. You know what I mean, in Chinese. So, the spies are disappointed. Everybody's disappointed except for, I guess the company, people in the company are still make the same amount of money no matter what.
I do think it's an important technology to develop. I also think in some ways it can be kind of overrated.
Would you say it's not obligatory? Would you say we don't have to have the best missiles in the world? Because it's a standoff weapon, right? I mean, if they can shoot missiles at us and we can't shoot them at them, then they've got the upper hand in everything.
We do already have many of the most advanced missiles in the world, just not in that particular category.
I mean, it seems like we're losing this. It seems pretty clear that we are not going to have the best hypersonic. I don't think they're going to be able to defend against our hypersonic missiles, so it might not matter. I personally don't think the offense matters, right? Both sides are going to have some kind of missile, right?
Sure.
We're going to shoot something at you, you're going to shoot something at us. The playmakers like the defense. Like, who's got the better defense? They don't have the assets and the money and everything to really defend themselves, probably as well as we can. But we also have more like forward operating bases and stuff, so they could hit Guam.
I think we've probably got more experience in some ways to making flying objects difficult to detect by early warning systems. So even if they pour budget into a defense system, it will probably take a while before their defense
They've already stolen
overmatches our offense.
They've stolen everything.
They've stolen a lot of our technology, sure, but
I mean, look at the J-20. I mean, they have our technology.
They can't steal all the institutional experience on designing new stuff, though.
This isn't a technology thing on us versus China now. Now it's just purely economics. It's like, does their economy collapse or does our economy collapse? That's it.
The economic arc is definitely a big deal.
It's the underpinning of everything.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can't fight a war without an economy. You can't build badass new missiles without an economy.
You can't recruit soldiers without recruiters.
Oh yeah,
you can't recruit.
That's true.
You can't recruit recruiters because you're idiots that didn't plan. And no one wants to be a recruiter. First off, recruiting crisis. And we haven't really talked about the recruiting crisis, but they're saying now we're 30,000 people short because we had 15,000 in basically it didn't have in 22. We lost another 15,000 in 23. I mean, the military and the army especially is shrinking involuntarily, which is technically an implosion, like that deep sub shit where we thought they were alive and it was just like crumple. Like a beer can on their face. Like, that's us. That is us. Maybe the U.S. military isn't getting beaten on the battlefield, but our enemies and the blunders of our leaders and stuff have. I mean, this is a defeat. 30,000 people not there, and an entire generation that has a bad view of the military and doesn't want to join unless they have exceptions to the rule.
No, it's not that we have a generation of people that don't want to join. It's that we have a generation of people that can't join because they're too fat and out of shape.
That's an excuse. No, that's an excuse. That is exactly what the generals say. Any kid can be, okay, I was skinny and I gained a muscle. I spent a year or two. Other people lose weight. We all know fat boys that came in and then they lost weight, they joined, they were Rangers or whatever. A kid, if they're motivated and they want to, they can lose weight and they can get in. If they're disabled, not too much they can do, but I mean, like, that's bullshit.
There's two things that would explain better than people not wanting to join. Not to say that we don't have a recruiting problem, because like you said, nobody wants to be a recruiter. We've had recruiting problems perennially for decades now. And that's largely been attributed toward a change in body habitus and exercise capabilities. But also another thing about it is last time I actually looked at the recruiting numbers for active duty were pretty much fine. It was reservists and National Guard that couldn't recruit. That's explained by people that have other lifestyles.
The structure of the military needs to change. It needs to be more reserved, more educated, older, less people, higher pay. This is actually putting us in the right direction. It's kind of like forcing us to do this. And you say, yeah, we've had this recruiting problem for a while, which, we recruited through those wars. I mean, this is like worse than we were in the wars.
Right, but when we were in the war, there were the people that wanted to join the army were motivated to do it. They knew exactly what they wanted to do. They didn't need recruiters. I didn't need a recruiter. I walked in and said, hey, man, I want to join the army. I needed a dude to hand me a contract. That's all I needed.
Okay. I get it. I mean, at that time, and for some of the people or whatever, but recruiters still were doing a lot and they were getting it done back then. This is a reflection of the brand of the military. It's not like recruiters have gotten worse or anything like that. The military brand is tarnished across all the services because they saw what happened in Afghanistan. And you said,
that's true.
What hasn't happened before, what they're saying is an unforeseen shortage of volunteer recruiters, right? Because recruiters generally volunteer to be recruiters because you don't want to be like forcing people to be recruiters because they're not going to be happy.
It's mixed because a lot of recruiters, that's actually their MOS. So there is no other job for them to do. So it'd be like an infantry dude volunteering to be in an infantry battalion. It's not.
Well, they're saying volunteer recruiters. Basically, no one in the military is volunteering to be a recruiter because they know they're not going to be successful. It's a shitty job anyway, and they're not going to be successful. So they don't want to do it. So then they don't volunteer. Then the people in charge of training the recruiters at Fort Knox, they didn't see this coming because no one in the military seeing anything coming. Okay, it's just
ever.
And then
I didn't even know this floor was going to get dirty.
These geniuses at Fort Knox recruit USAREC or whatever the fuck is going on there. They're like, oh shit, there's no one signed up for these recruiter classes for next year. So like, what happens if these recruiting classes don't happen? Recruiter classes. Then all of next year, it's going to get even worse, right? Because they're not going to have enough recruiters even for the pittance of people that are coming up. And that's what they're doing. They're trying to like surge, throw money at the problem. They're pulling all the levers they can, but they're running out of levers to pull. So they essentially last minute sent out orders to 200 of these people that were basically told to be, they were voluntold recruiters. Most of them did not show up. 132 out of 200 no-shows for training. You have orders and there are no-shows. These orders were for like next week or like the week after. These people have families and houses and all this shit. And all of a sudden they got to go, do this and that. Like chain of command were like intervening me. Like, you're not like pulling this guy or this gal to be a recruiter. Like this is ridiculous. The chain of command were giving relief. And then you had all these like horror stories of these families that were like, how the hell are we supposed to do this? And then they went on local media or on social media and outrage started building. So then some of that was canceled. And they're supposed to have 200 more in the next class, which has already started, which they probably definitely don't have. So it's like, we can't recruit the recruiters. That's inside the military. So this isn't a problem with people being too fat. This is a problem in the military. Then we can't get people into the military. I would like to see what the retention numbers are, honestly. And the retention numbers are probably good. If you're like in the military for a while and you're doing okay and the economy's not great, you're probably staying. Incentives for these recruiters, they're lowering standards for the recruiters too. So if you're an E6 and you get 24 contracts in your first year, they will promote you to E7, no questions asked. No questions asked promotions, right? This is like a battlefield promotion, basically. This is like you went into the battle, like you started the day in E5, and all of a sudden you're a lieutenant at the end of the day. Like, what the fuck happened there? E5 to E6, you get a $5,000 bonus and a no questions asked promotion to E6 as a recruiter. So what do you think about no questions asked promotions? That's how we promote leaders, no questions asked.
No, I think it's a pretty terrible way to go about promoting leaders. What they're doing is they're attempting to incentivize people becoming recruiters because, like you said, nobody wants to be a recruiter. And part of that is it is difficult to recruit, and we live in an environment in which recruiting is kind of dangerous to your career in a way. It could be good for your career. It's lottery, right? It could be good for your career. It could be bad for your career.
I'd rather be a drill sergeant than a recruiter. Like, people can't...
I don't want to be either of those.
I'd rather go to county lockup than be a drill sergeant. So it's like, recruiting is not very popular.
County lockup's not that bad, okay?
Yeah, there's money in my books.
It's a somewhat dangerous career path because you're dealing with underage people and their parents all day, and you're trying to get them to join an organization that they either already want to join or there's no amount of convincing that's going to make them join in the first place. And then these dudes, so there's the carrot and the stick, right? So they're incentivized to try to recruit new recruits. If they're not successful at that, they're probably going to be punished somehow, right?
So where we're from, they do use the carrot and the stick, but they take the carrot and they shove it up your ass and they beat you with the stick until you do what you're fucking told.
Right. If you're not being successful as a recruiter for like a quarter or whatever, however it goes, it's not really going to work out so great for you. You talk about volunteer recruiters. There's both kinds, right? There's dudes that are like 11 Bravos that are volunteering to be a recruiter because they think that's going to be a break because they're dumb. But there's also people that's what they do. They've been recruiters their entire career and that's all they do.
Yeah, it's a salesman, basically.
Yeah, professional salesman.
And they don't want to be a recruiter because the kid's going to be like, well, why can't I smoke weed? And the guy's like, I don't know, I smoke weed. I'll tell you. You know what I mean? you know, and or they'll be like, well, what Afghanistan, or what about like the rape or something like that, and they'll be like, I don't know. I mean, people aren't putting their kids in the military. The recruiters probably
Around here they are. In South Carolina has a very high recruiting rate, to the point where when I was trying to get back in, like from the reserves to active duty, they were basically like, don't call us, we'll call you. And then they don't. Like, seriously. Because they have so many kids joining straight out of high school around here. There's like a tradition of it in the area.
It's like Trump America.
I mean, it's a not particularly wealthy state that also has a long history of producing military members.
Well, I'll tell you, man, like in the Revolutionary War, Maryland Regiment was the best in the Continental Army.
I'm sure that's totally all true.
Only soldiers that could stand up toe-to-toe to the British Army. And right now, no one's signing up where I'm from.
Where exactly was what's-his-name caught up in that swamp?
Huh?
The British general that couldn't seem to make it out of South Carolina.
Oh,
when Francis Marion was kicking his ass.
Yeah, I can't remember his name, but yeah, that guy. Yeah, powder wig guy.
Yeah, I mean, he probably sucked in general, so it's his problem, I guess.
I mean, he probably was just trained for a different war. He's trained to fight the French army in northern France or something.
Yeah, and a bunch of fields and stuff.
Yeah.
But just stand up and shoot at each other.
Yeah, all these like guys with these like long rifles and stuff out there. So moving on to tech. I missed my show last week. There were scheduling issues, so some of this is from like a week ago, but whatever. It's still big news. AI regulation stuff was from like 2 weeks ago. Two big things with the executive order that Biden signed on AI, which essentially is just like it's an executive order. So it can be changed later, but it's directing all the departments to start regulating, right? And what this does is it opens up powers in all of the departments for them to start forming regulations around AI. This opens up opportunities for consultants, other power brokers, people to get paid, people to have influence on how the regulations turn out here or there. Money starts flowing, lobbyists start buying stakes, and it gets like the whole process rolling. Joe Biden just figured out what AI was
yesterday,
the morning of this signing of the executive order, right? What they're saying is that basically Obama wrote this stuff. He's hanging out with these Silicon Valley people. We've been through this before, but I mean, I think it's probably better that Obama than Biden. I mean, it's obviously going to be the Democrats. So, I mean, it's like probably the best for it. But, Obama walked this in and they're just doing kind of like the shadow vice president in a way, at least on this. Things that he wants to play in. I thought about this too. And I think with Obama, he sees it like, okay, Joe's got like protecting his legacy and stuff like that at this point after the Trump thing. But it's like he knows that Joe can't handle this AI thing. He knows Kamala can't handle this AI thing. So he's like, I'm the former president. I'm like the shadow vice president. I want to be meddling because he doesn't want to mess with traditions. But I think this AI thing is too important for Junior to handle. And Biden doesn't even know what's going on. He can't remember what he had for breakfast. So it's like, Obama, what do you think?
I don't know enough about AI to really in-depth discuss like what should and shouldn't be regulated in it or what those regulations would look like. That's the problem our government has too. I mean, there's very few people in our government that are young enough or tech savvy enough to know about that also.
The government is not good at technology.
No. I feel like this is going to end up being a train wreck. I don't know what that train wreck's going to look like because I don't know what that regulation is going to look like, but there's no way it's going to go right.
I was reading an article this morning, which we didn't cover in our plans for this, but basically there's two thought categories on this, which one is accelerationists, which they think we should go as fast as possible with AI. That's me. And then there's like doomers, which is like boomers, but they think that AI is going to be a bad thing, pernicious, or that it needs to be heavily like regulated and stuff like that. I think we could do some of that, play it a little more safe if it wasn't for China, because China and Russia, but mostly China, are going to push this to limits. And so I don't believe that we have the luxury of pussyfooting this. So that's where I'm at. And I think this is a huge corporate power grab. These big companies are going to have undue influence, and they're going to set up a situation where entrepreneurs, because these big companies don't create the innovations, they are essentially buying smaller innovative companies into their portfolio and integrating them into their behemoth, like war machine, like Meta, Google, stuff like that. No innovations coming out of Meta. No innovations coming out of Google. There's a lot of smart people that work there, and this gets very confused. But innovation is a creation of new things. That starts with small, innovative teams of people, which that doesn't happen in these big companies, right? I mean, I talked about this when I was talking about AI in the Pentagon years ago, so they haven't really figured it out yet, and hopefully they will. But I said we need small teams attacking big problems. Like, you don't just get everyone on one big team and then try to like overwhelm this problem. You get like 10 teams and you let them go. You know, they start to fail and you cut them as they get further along. But and then you can merge them together, take their ideas. But you have to have these small teams putting everyone together, and then it's like everything hinges on the success of that one program. It's like this long range hypersonic missile thing. Why don't we have like 10 different versions? It's stuff we have to have.
I mean, it's entirely possible we have versions that haven't been seen in the news yet.
That's not how it is, because this is the model of weapons programs in the post World War II era, right? The military wants control. So these military officers are like, I want this missile. And so they get one of these big companies and they get a cost plus contract. So it's like the officers are telling the company what to do. And the company's like, okay, you're paying us, right? We'll do whatever you want. And then they just do it. And then it sucks and it doesn't work right. Or it's just like, it's okay. Now in the Cold War, that worked okay because Russia, USSR was like way more fucked up than us economically. But with China, I don't know if it's going to work. They're getting ripped off. We're getting ripped off too. We pay a lot more for this stuff than we should. That means that we don't get as much of it. We have less money for our people. And, you know, these guys are just getting rich. We have to figure out a different model. It's just not working. The long-range missile it's got zero range. The range isn't 18,000 miles. It's 0 miles, 0 feet, 0 inches because it didn't move an inch. It's unset.
Well, I mean, most missiles have a range of 0 miles before they're developed into like actually flying.
Yeah, well, we're still in that zone. I mean, this thing was supposed to be getting deployed for field testing at the end of the year. I mean, this is ludicrous. And they've had years.
Yeah, I mean, I can't make that excuse for them. You know, you're not wrong. It's something that should be done.
There's no competition. There's no one's getting fired. No one's going to lose money. I'm reading Elon Musk's book. When he's building his rockets and shit, it's like do or die. It's like his money on the line. And that's why he's the richest man or one of the richest men in the world, because he put it on the line. But these government guys are like, yeah, they don't care. Like, I'm going out of town with my wife for the weekend. Elon Musk is on some island in the Pacific, eaten alive by mosquitoes, trying to shoot his missile off in the air, you know, with these military officers just going home. Why is that guy in charge? The company can't lose money, so they don't give a shit. As long as they show up, they're gonna get the check. So it's just a fucked system. Back to AI. We need the AI for the military and for our lives. Obama said about it, he thinks that there's general humility in the tech industry for these powerful models. We've seen that AI is powerful. Obviously, it's powerful. It's probably the most important technologies that humans will ever create. This executive order benefits the big companies. The people kind of like that don't want the regulations. Meta's chief AI scientist, Yan Li Chun, says it mimics oppressive historical controls on new technologies, which I agree with. I mean, think about the old phone company. Remember they had the monopoly on the phone company probably before most younger people were alive, but like they had to break that up, and then the oil company, and then it just retards the growth of these technologies and our benefit that we gain from them. Because for decades, the telecom industry was just like milking the people. Like the telephone bill, the long distance rates, all that shit. And that's what they're going to do here. They're going to stifle the innovation. But Obama says, and he wrote it, so why wouldn't he agree with it?
I also noticed that there seems to be obviously, there's some financial stakes. As could be predicted, all the naysayers that don't want AI regulated all stand to gain money by it not being regulated.
Yeah, like venture capitalists. Like the venture capitalists invest in the small companies and they make money when the small companies become big companies. So they are more on the side of the small companies. Plus, most of them got their fortune by being in small companies or investing in small companies. So they're on the side of the small companies. But like the big companies want to buy the small companies. So it's like a buyer-seller dynamic of the regulations. Like the smaller company people have the moral high ground, but the bigger companies are just going to roll over. It's corporate. It's all about the bottom line. So I'm not going to rehash the whole situation with Tommy Tuberville. I've already been talking about it a lot. He's obviously blocking the military promotion. A couple details, like political maneuvers on it. But what do you think in general about Tommy Tuberville's block, Dibbs?
I mean, it's obviously politicization of military appointments.
They essentially are not reviewing any officers for anything. It's just like a rubber stamp, essentially.
Yeah. The normal process is to approve them as a block. And what he's doing instead is forcing them to vote on each one of them. And that's going to take 700 and something hours at a minimum to actually make happen.
Well, they let it back up. If they just done one at a time here and there, but they let it back up because they wanted to go back to the rubber stamp to the block, because this is the game. And, Tommy's mad about the abortions. Like, I get it. I mean, but the game that he's disrupting is this conveyor belt of senior generals, junior generals, like these high level people who are essentially SES, like bureaucrats. They're bureaucrats in a uniform, of pumping these people up into the highest echelons of the government. And we've got like 300 or 400 of these people at this point. Admirals, generals, people in that vein.
I mean, we've had a few hundred of them for many years.
Yeah, and so you have a couple of them who are like in Delta Force, so they're these big heroes, and like they have this like stellar record, and they essentially put those guys out front, and then they take all these little like desk weasels and these wieners, and these people who have never done anything except just like be like little fucking bureaucrat motherfuckers, and who by the time you get to that level with those type of people, it's the best of what's left. Because all of the really like hot shot, some of these like heroic young military officers, like they're fucking out the door, dude. They're at Goldman Sachs. They're at Harvard Law. Like, they're gone. They're not going to be a 1-star or something like this. So you get these people, and they're committed, right? And so they know when they come out of as a 2-star or whatever, that they will get hired into one of these big companies. That's the pipeline. And they will get a big payout, whether it's a salary, whether they're on a board. They get $500,000-$600,000 a year to be on a board, go to like 2 or 3 meetings, if that. Maybe they're online meetings. I mean, they're essentially getting funneled this money. It's like a payout after their career is over. But in order to ascend and get that payout, waterfall payout from these companies, they have to play by the rules while they're a 1-star, while they're a 2-star, while they're a 3-star, because that 3-star got signed that fucking check. And that's all that matters. They just need these guys to sign these fucking checks. And Tommy, by blocking them, they have these acting people in there. They can sign some checks, but there's some checks and some contracts that the acting person can't really sign because the system's not designed to have the promotions blocked. And everyone thinks that, he's a football coach. He's a strategist, a tactician. I mean, this is the most effective senatorial tactic that has probably been deployed in recent memory, except for maybe, I can't even think of anything successful. Ted Cruz did his filibuster and shut the government down over Obamacare, but that just caused a mess, and he wasn't that successful anyways. But like what Tommy Tuberville's been doing, extremely successful political maneuver.
So how do we measure the success?
He's protesting. It's a protest. He's disrupting their operations and the status quo, just like Colin Kaepernick. Colin Kaepernick.
Not really, because eventually he'll be gone and they'll go back to the old system. I mean, the system's encoded in law and regulation.
Who says he's going to be gone? Is he going to die? I don't know. They'll change the rules, but they don't want to change the rules because they're fussy about that. But, there's tactics, right? So basically, they want to keep the rules, but they have this like backlog. It's like they're constipated, right? They got to dump out all these like shitty military officers. Some good ones. I get it. But I'm saying there's a lot of dog shit in there that has to run all these programs. And everybody knows it. You've met these people, or I have.
No, I've worked directly with a lot of these people.
Yeah. Come on. Everyone, yeah. They want to essentially bundle them up and like pass them through and then invoke cloture, override basically this filibuster. And in the beginning of this, I predicted that the Republicans would start coming to Tommy because everyone was like, oh, he can't do it or whatever like that. I'm like, no, they're going to realize how effective his tactic is. Josh Hawley did a similar blockade against Army civilian promotions because of the barracks conditions for Leonard Wood. And then Mike Lee in Utah is now backing up Tuberville and also helping him in his blocking of this, right? That's only going to grow because he's successful. He's like a guerrilla warrior. He's gaining people to his cause off of this to make a stand here. See it growing, honestly.
Maybe.
Think about it like this. They're trying to invoke cloture, so they need 9 Republicans to vote with all the Democrats, and they essentially override this filibuster, and they one time just dump out all these officers. Then they go back to the old way, and if he still keeps doing it, then they'll just vote on them like once a week, because it takes 5 hours or something. So maybe like 1 or 2 a week they'll work it in the schedule. But they basically have to convince 9 Republicans, and then those Republicans are going to be targeted because they're essentially siding with the Democrats, and he's tied it to the abortion issue. So they essentially have to be these like moderate Republicans, how many of them, or these like hyper military Republicans. But if you're a hyper military Republican, then you probably have a lot of like anti-abortion people in your camp and giving you money who probably like Tommy. So then you're opening yourself up to a primary maybe or something. I don't know.
His demands are never going to happen. Like, the Army's not going to. It doesn't really matter where you and I stand on abortion so much as if it is a legal medical procedure that's recognized by the United States Department of Defense, they're going to pay for soldiers to travel for that procedure. Anything else would be considered discriminatory, and there'd be lawsuits out the ass.
Taxpayer funds shouldn't go to be doing the abortions, and then we get into this like travel thing, and so I don't know, whatever. It is
sure,
what it is,
maybe.
but it's a fight, But yeah, his tactic has been extraordinarily successful, and this guy has just became senator. He replaced Doug Jones,
but it's not going to be successful at reversing that DoD policy.
It doesn't have to. It's a successful protest. The Palestine protest was a successful protest in DC. They had 20,000 people, and it's a turning point. The American consciousness around this like Israeli Gaza thing. Successful. Is it going to save one person in Gaza? No, of course not. But
that's not very successful, is it?
War war and conflict and politics are all interrelated.
Sure. War is an extension of politics.
There's no hard line between politics and war. And a football game is a war too. It's got obviously much clearer rules and it's got a finite duration.
It is a proxy for warfare, yes, between organized nation states.
Yeah, all these things line up. We have to be looking at these people, what they're doing and stuff like that. But I don't think he'll get 9. I think this is going to drag. I think it's going to drag. I think he'll behind the scenes. You've got, Hawley, Mike Lee, and Tuberville, and who knows else. And any of these people that want to vote with the Democrats, they're going to be hounding them. And I'd be like, no, man. I mean, this is a thorn in the Democrat side right now, and they don't want to pull it out, in my opinion.
I mean, you're probably right. It probably will drag out further, but that won't get the DoD to reverse its policy. That won't get better generals. That won't get us hypersonic missiles any faster. That's for sure.
They're not fucking doing anything. They just do what all the politicians tell them to do anyway. I mean, you saw Kabul. What does it matter how good our generals are? I mean, like, really?
I mean, I think that's pretty important.
I don't think we need generals.
Oh, man. I feel like... Oh, my gosh. That's absurd.
Gotta expand your mind, brother.
I can't think of any militaries that have been successful at conquering the world or driving off their enemies without leadership of some sort.
I personally don't see anything that someone who's like a colonel / like a 1-star can't do that some fucking 4-star can do. By the time someone's a 3 or a 4-star, they're just some fucking bureaucrat in DC going to cocktail parties. Like, anybody can do what the fuck they're doing. None of them have any strategic vision. And the ones that do have strategic vision get subsumed into the groupthink and they can't punch through. There's no innovation.
I don't think that's really true. I mean, JSOC's a 3-star command, SOCOM's a 3 or 4-star command.
It's one elite.
The dudes that are up for managing a fleet they're there to be strategic leaders, not just to be bureaucrats. Yeah, bureaucracy is a lot of things. But honestly, they don't even really engage in bureaucracy as much as you might expect. I mean, they have an XO and an aide and all kinds of people to do that for them. Yeah, they definitely politically rub shoulders.
They're not greasing palms themselves. Yeah, I get that. But they're the conduit. And they have their buddies that they went to West Point with, and they out of the Defense Corporation, and they're talking to their wife in the evening over eating their mashed potatoes and peas about which company they're going to work at. Lockheed offered them $3 million, and Northrop was going to offer them 3.7 over 2 years employment contract as soon as they take that fucking uniform off. This is all happening behind the scenes. Like, they're not going to like open the robe up and let's show you everything of what's happening. I mean, but it's all fucking legal. I'm not saying it's not illegal. You set up a system. Human beings are incentivized to attack that system and game it. And after you have generations and generations that have been beating up the same system, I mean, these generals, it's like their daddy was a general. His daddy was a general. And this shit. And these people in the government, it's like you work at this one place in the government and all their kids, they raise them to work there. And they know all the bureaus in the State Department. And they know all this, and they're like a CIA family or whatever. Or wherever it is that they're going, and they filter them up into it. And it's like the red carpet just roll out for them. And they know all the rules. And if they get into anything at work, their parents know all the rules. They know people, they can call people. I mean, it's just like inbred shit.
That's not always true, though. I mean,
always.
I've known more than one general that has actively tried to talk his children out of joining the military, usually unsuccessfully. And some of them, their fathers were enlisted. They weren't generals before them. Or some of them, their parents weren't even in the military.
These are not the people who are in charge, though. I mean, there's going to be generals hanging around that have, a different way of thinking about things or whatever, but but
you're trying to make this
isn't going to funnel them to the top.
But you're trying to make this 100% case, and
no, I'm not. Absolutely not. I'm just explaining the system. I'm not talking about every single person. I mean, there's no statement you can make that's going to cover every single person in the military, other than they all wear the same clothes. I mean, we're coming from all over the country, different backgrounds, different educations, level of educations, male, female, and everything. It's just like, it's not everybody, but there's this like system. And it's like, I don't hate anybody. There's people I really don't like, and I think they did a bad job being a general or being a this or that. But we just have to all break the groupthink and be like, we need a new system because this isn't working. 30,000 missing soldiers that are just out there working at, Walmart or something, or in a bar, when they should be, in formation in the morning. They don't trust the military. They don't see it as good for them. They see better prospects out in the world. I talked to this guy. He's from South Africa, and he knew that I'd been in the military, and he was telling me, and he was like, thought it was cool. And he's just like, but I'm from South Africa. Like, I'm not going to join the fucking military. Like, I might have if I was from another country. I stored that away. I'm thinking about it now, and I look at this recruiting numbers and all this bullshit, and I think in my mind, and I'm like, that's what our kids are fucking doing. They're like, I'm not joining this bullshit military. It's not John Koenig or anyone here that's saying it. The
We don't
kids
have
are
kids,
saying
man.
it. The kids are saying it. They're like, I'm not going to get my ass shot off in, Afghanistan 2.0 while all these guys with spreadsheets in Northern Virginia, cash in and aren't risking their dicks. Like, it's a bad deal. And the women know that 1 in 3 of these women are getting sexually assaulted. That's just like the statistics. And no one's even addressing the problems or solving them. And it's just a collapse.
Man, that's a hot topic in itself.
It all comes from the generals because, like, these problems could all be solved if we had leaders. You can pick out the worst cases of generals. Like, I could sit here and be like, put up their mugshot or whatever and be like, this is the worst fucking general ever, or this or that, and just beat them up or whatever. But always is going to have bad apples. Like, that's not a good argument. The argument is the groupthink. It's just like everybody is just like keeping this train rolling. And we have to stop the train and service it and change out the passenger list and get some new conductor in the train and get it going again so it can run for the next 50 years. Because the military we have right now is not the military that's going to last for 50 years. Like, this is not going to last for 10 years if we just keep it rolling. Space Force, very new. I always make fun of Space Force because you got to make fun of everyone that's not your branch because we're in the military. And I've been trying to think of it. And everyone's like, oh, Space Force. Everybody thinks they're cool. But I'm like, the fuck do they do? Like, honestly, you know what I mean? It's like they don't really have a mission. It's kind of like this new thing and it's cool or whatever, I guess. But it's supposed to be kind of more techie and stuff like that, kind of like the Air Force is supposed to be versus the other services. But they have this new strategy out which spotlights the Space Force's role in the joint fight, coordinating space mission needs across the services. Did you read the Space Force strategy?
I did read that. The Space Force is super fun to make fun of.
Yeah.
You've probably seen this TV show with Steve Carell, I hope. But I wouldn't say that they don't have a mission. That's not really true. The Air Force had Space Command prior to that, so those were the dudes that were involved in the command and control of, like, surveillance satellites and whatever other stupid shit we do in space. It's not just about exploration. There's military value to space. The way I would look at Space Force compared to Air Force is it's basically like the cosmic version of the Navy versus the Coast Guard. I mean, everybody had coastal ships at one point, and nobody thought they needed to go out to the ocean because there's Krakens out there and they'll eat you. But eventually everybody had to tackle the ocean if they wanted to continue being a great power.
I don't think there's any vision for what the Space Force is going to be. Like, what this says basically is like the Space Force is a coordinator of space-based missions. And there are a lot of space missions. I get it. Like, we're in the space age with the military now, but we're not at the point where they're driving missions. Like, Space Force isn't like going to the moon or going to Mars or building some like fight, like Star Wars fighter weapons. I mean, they probably have some kind of weapons and shit out there, but I mean, they're basically just doing space operations and running satellites and programs and spending money, I think. I mean, they're not going to fight anywhere ever. Maybe this is like a thinking man's type organization, I guess, I hope. But this is not a group of people that are going to fight anything. Now, hopefully they will fight in their professional careers. They'll work late at night to get their classified satellite in the right spot in sub-orbit or whatever. But like, they're not going to be like they're not going to be changing mags.
Shooting people in the face is like a very small portion of warfare.
So 2010.
It's a part of warfare that interests me.
But what's the mission? I mean, you have a vision. Maybe you should be in charge of the Space Force. Would you like to be a military officer?
No.
I can guarantee you a board seat at Northrop Grumman after you're done, after you signed all the checks.
There's very few people in the Navy that are shooting people in the face. There's very few people in the Air Force that are shooting people in the face. That doesn't mean we don't need people to figure out where to put a boat. I mean, somebody's got to do that.
Well, know what the mission is. If you're like, what's the mission of the Navy? You're like, I don't know. They got a lot of boats and whatever. They sail around. And it's like the Army, they walk around everywhere. And the Marines, it's like they drink beer and all this crayons and everything. And, you have this perception, but it's like, if you met someone from the Space Force, like, I'm in the Space Force. What do you do? What do you do, bro? Like, well, I got a computer and, my boss in charge of this program and I do this and that. But I mean, like, they're not going to know how to shoot a gun. They're not going to know this.
What do you think about Intel dudes? I mean, it's not like those are James Bond guys. I mean,
there's some like tactical intel stuff and
very
whatever.
But
yeah, I mean, the vast
small.
majority of intel is office work. But I think that's more of what we need. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying like get rid of them or anything. I'm just saying like this is the future of where we're going. I don't think they'll do a good job. I don't think they'll recruit the right people for Space Force. I don't think they'll recruit the right leaders. I think they'll spend a bunch of money. A lot of it will be wasted. Do we need to do it? I guess we have this system. They've just got a bunch of programs. They talk about regional jam jamming, resilient missile warning, missile tracking satellites, persistent infrared surveillance stuff. I mean, satellites, intelligence. I mean, Space Force is going to be it's going to be skewed towards intelligence. In this early part of Space Force, it's going to be skewed towards intelligence because
or at least collection of intelligence.
All they got are these satellites, right? I mean, they're not doing operation. All of the terrestrial operations are going to be handled by one of the other services, and they're not really ready to do operations out in space, serious big military operations. So it's going to be, intelligence.
Well, I definitely don't want some army dude in charge of figuring out where to point a satellite. He might catch my ass on fire with some.
I'm not sure that there's culturally much difference between an army officer and a Space Force officer.
There's probably some cultural differences. I've known some Air Force officers that were from Space Command, and they weren't your stereotypical infantry officers. It's not that those are as stereotypical as people think they are.
They worked in an office. We worked in a dog cage. It's obviously different.
They're a different sort of nerd.
Yeah, we had one computer for like 100 guys, and then we had like 5 guns per guy. I mean, that's a different type of military unit, and I guess they have more computers now. But I don't know, man. I mean, it's fine, whatever. Space Force, go, do your thing. The military needs to change. I think this is probably going in the right direction. Hopefully they don't waste all this money, but...
Yeah, I don't really know where that's going to end up. I don't know if they're going to end up with the best leaders. I don't know if they're going to end up with the best fiscal responsibility or not. Like, I mean, it's government, so probably not, right? Hopefully they'll be successful at their stuff, and we'll start to see some value of breaking them out of the Air Force.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we have to have some kind of space component. See what happens. Whether the Air Force does the satellites or whether the Space Force does it doesn't really matter. Like, someone's going to do the satellites. So
yeah, it doesn't really affect me who does it, as long as it's not like a grunt.
Yeah. Something to talk about. We got to get a little diversity here. Can't talk about Hamas all day. Last article I got here is interesting. This affects military personnel, data privacy. And essentially the military has been hacked. All these places have been hacked. And so there's military PII of probably former and other military that has been stolen by hackers and stuff. And it's out on the dark web and you can buy it. And so if you want someone's information, you can essentially go to the dark web and these criminals, you'll pay them in Bitcoin or something. And then for like $12, they'll give you their record out of these stolen databases that they have, right? So you can see what they bought at Target, or you can see, where they're living and their address and whatever is in the database that was stolen that they're in. A study commissioned by West Point, U.S. Military Academy, of data brokers. These are called data brokers. There's this like shadow economy out there where people are like slinging data around, selling it and stuff like that. Because if you think about it, if you have data and someone else wants it, you can essentially charge them whatever you want because it costs you nothing to copy it, right? Like if you want my database, I could just give you a copy of my database. I could charge you $20,000. I could charge you $2 million. It depends on how much you're willing to pay. And there's a lot of money flying around. Data can be very valuable.
I mean, that's what social media is, right? It's a way to collect data and sell it to the highest bidder, advertiser.
Yeah, but this is data that has been stolen by criminals and essentially is available on the dark web. So this isn't like...
I'm just saying there's an economic precedent for it.
Yes, but it's not quite the same as if like you log into Facebook or Instagram, they force you to sign this contract, the privacy policy, which means they keep your data, they can sell it to whoever they want, and then they sell it, and then that company has it. They bought it legally, and you consented to Instagram collecting your data, and Instagram then subsequently sold it to somebody, and then maybe they sell it to someone else. This is different. This is a hacker stole the data and is selling it to anybody with $12. These researchers went on the dark web and they looked for veterans and stuff like that, and they found databases of veterans who own motorcycles, military family housing lists, and kind of like these enriched data sets where they'll use an AI algorithm to kind of categorize you. And then once they have the categories, they will kind of assign a name to it. They'll look at the group, people in that group, and they'll be like, oh, these are hardcore military families, like lifers, mom and dad are both in the military or whatever, like real, like military families, like long-term military families. It's got contact info for the people and friends and family. And if you don't know how these work, like these databases are all linked. So they can put your name in and they got everyone in your family, people you've been associated with, maybe like your old roommate from college, like these names that have been tied to you through in the past, right? And like maybe it was 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and it was before the internet was really pervasive. This data stuff was, and we were just doing about our business back when you were in college or whatever. But that information's been sitting in a database. And then after 10 years where somebody sold that to somebody, sold it, got hacked, whatever, and that data's out there. So if someone wants to target you, a bad actor, and you're in the military, say Hamas is like, oh, the Marines, like they get a bunch of list of military families and they send them out to all on Telegram, they're like, oh, kill all these people or whatever. You know what I mean? Like that's like a threat analysis there. Or it could be other things too. It could be for intelligence. Like they could be like, oh, this guy, his kid has cancer or something. So let's go to him and, a Chinese agent, probably not a Chinese person, but working for like an agent, offer them like a business loan or something for like $200,000. And then they would take it and then they kind of have them sign something and then they kind of develop the asset, So there's a lot of ways this information could be utilized. But what do you think about it?
There is a comparison to be made with social media. I understand what you mean about legal versus illegal. We probably need to find a way to stem the flow of personal information, not just with the military, but in general in this country. Anybody can sell any information about anybody collected through any method that they feel like collecting it. And it's fairly legal in most places. And the military has always had an even bigger problem with privacy. I don't know if we were still doing this when you came in, but we used to write our social security number on our freaking duffel bag right next to our name and middle initial. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, but we didn't have any money.
And they were walking around outside with our name and social security number written on the side of our bag. Like that's so dumb.
We need to be protecting these people. Easiest way would be for Congress just to pass a law saying it's illegal to sell the information to anyone in the military or their family or whatever. That would shut this down pretty quick. As it is now, the laws that they passed, you do have recourse. There are these apps. One's called Permission Slip, and another one I saw is called Incogni. But there's some other data privacy companies out there, and God bless them. They utilize these laws that when you pay them the $7 or whatever, they know all these data brokers, so they get your information. They're like, delete this guy's stuff now. They will comply because of the law, you know what I mean? But when that law was passed, they could have just been like, yeah, you can't sell this stuff. But then the data brokers and the tech guys come in and they have their lobbyists because they make a lot of money doing this. And so they come in and they make sure that the law says essentially that you have to opt out. It's like an opt-out versus an opt-in, where it'd be like, yeah, keep all my data forever, you asshole. No, fuck you. Yeah, so we're in this opt-out thing, and we just have to, it's a new normal. It's just like you said, you wouldn't like write your social security number on like your backpack. You gotta like clean some of this hygiene up. We've been living our lives. Our names are in these databases. We are connected to our friends. We are connected to our families. And you just have to take the extra step of defending yourself and like, do that like LifeLock thing where that locks up your credit so people can't like take a mortgage out in your name. I mean, I see a lot of these commercials, and I think it's that home title thing where people can like forge your name and essentially transfer the title to your house out from under you, and then like they'll just sell the house and take out like mortgages on it and stuff like that. So I mean, there's a lot of this stuff where you just have to.
Well, home buying is a massive privacy problem because as soon as you apply for a loan, that information goes to like every freaking loan person in America, and they just start calling you nonstop. And then you start getting phone calls like, hey man, you want to sell your house? Motherfucker, I'll call you when I want to sell my house.
Yeah.
You're right. I forgot I was going to sell my house today, man. Thanks for calling. Come on.
In the modern world, you cannot just protect yourself with a revolver. There's this other world, and you have to protect yourself in cyberspace, protect your name, protect your social security number, protect your biometrics, your family stuff too. And we all have to, especially military, former military, current military, whatever, could be targets, in any situation, I guess. I just want to highlight it.
Some hygiene, like you said, would definitely help, like people maintaining best practices of like anonymity and keeping their profile low and locking their credit when they're not using it, stuff like that. But then there's also the other problem where, sometimes the government leaks all of your shit, and that's super annoying. Like, I'm one of the people that OPM leaked security clearance information for. Like, these are the people that determine whether or not I should be allowed.
They didn't leak it.
Whatever the case may be, there was a leak, whether it was...
It's called a breach. A leak would be like a person and handed a USB drive to a journalist, right?
Yeah, fair enough. My point is, these are the people that determine whether or not I should be allowed to have access to classified information, and they can't even keep my own information under wraps.
Yeah, but they're powerful and you're not, so...
Right.
I mean, that's the way it works.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, hygiene will help, but hygiene's not 100%. Like, there needs to be laws and regulations to protect people.
Yeah, no, we gotta...
Yeah, I mean, some of them would be broken in that example anyway, so maybe it wasn't a great example. But
yeah, we gotta build up the legislation around this and get these people under control. Find a good balance between privacy and economic activity. All right, well, that's the last article. So thank you very much, Dibbs, for joining and sharing your opinions and everything. Hope you have fun. Got any final words?
Nah, man. I'm going to go eat.
Thanks to everybody for watching. Talk to you next time. Goodbye.